Hello, all. Welcome to Brother Telepathy. That's my brother Graham. I'm Micah, and we are coming at you with another mock draft today. This is our post free agency mock draft. We've seen a lot of moves going on, a lot of pieces have been filled, so now we've got a mock draft to get into. Graham, we'll get straight into it, but you got any other thoughts?
Yeah, I'm excited to do this one. I think we were both looking forward to this one. Post free agency, I feel like is where a lot of clarity finally kind of starts to happen. You see what teams do in free agency, how that informs the draft. I think they do go hand in hand. You can kind of read the tea leaves a little bit. So this is one that I was personally looking forward to. I think you were as well.
Cool. Let's get right into it. I had the even picks last time, so this time I'm going to kick us off and have the odd picks. Graham's going to have the evens.
Let me
This
just say
pick,
too, it's predictive once again. Sorry, I should
yeah,
always let it clarify. This is a predictive mock draft. We will be doing trades in this mock draft as well. Not to say there are necessarily any, but there will be potential trades in this one. It's hard to
poss-
predict, but we like to include those if we can.
yeah, trades happen every year. So trades are going to happen in the draft. They're just so impossible to predict, but it's fun to predict them every once in a while. So we'll see. We'll see what we come up with again if there are any here. So first overall pick, we're going to kick it off with Mr. Cameron Bartholomew Ward. I have no idea if that's it's not his middle name. I don't even have to act like it
And
might
say,
be.
right, yeah,
That's
no
not his middle
chance.
name. No, Cam Ward. With all the stuff that's been going on, the moves that the Titans have been making, they're gearing up for a quarterback, and I've been on Cam Ward at one for a while. I wasn't really buying the trade out possibility from a few weeks ago around the combine time, but Cam Ward is the pick at one.
Yeah, I think that makes a ton of sense. I think, some people are out there saying like the O line moves are signifying quarterback. In my opinion, the O line needed to be fixed no matter who is back there. So that's not as much of an insight to me. The thing that was the biggest kicker was them not making a move in free agency for a starter level veteran quarterback, which we
Yeah.
talked about in our last video. I think this is a gear up for Cam Ward. So I'm totally with you on that. I'm bought in, of course, being a Cam Ward fan myself. But yeah, it seems like he's definitively going number one. I think there's still a potential for a trade back scenario. I know you disagree with that a little bit, but I think Cam Ward's pretty safely number one here in April. Number two, Cleveland Browns here. So this is one that I know you in particular, really both of us have been saying hard for us to imagine quarterback here. Now, I will say with the hype that Cam Ward is getting, I think if for some weird reason he would have slipped past one, I think the Browns definitely could be in play to take him here at number two. Obviously, we know he's pretty much going number one, so that's not going to be what happens in this mock draft. From here, we've talked about it before. I'm not convinced that they're going to take Shador at this spot. It just, I don't know if Andrew Berry is really enough on the hot seat to warrant a reach at quarterback at number two overall. You have probably, their favorite player in the draft being either Travis Hunter or Abdul Carter here still available. I think the idea of Abdul Carter and Abdul Carter and Myles Garrett being on the same defensive line would be nuts. Like, that would be such a great pairing, in my opinion. Abdul Carter playing that weak side edge rusher. But in this mock draft, we are going to go Travis Hunter, number two. Most dynamic player in the draft, generational from the standpoint of excelling at both positions. So, they mentioned they saw him as a receiver. We'll see how he turns out to be at the next level. But let's go Travis Hunter, number two.
Yeah, and I like that. And it sounds like based on what you just said, you're probably more in the Abdul Carter boat at two, which I would put myself in that category. I don't want to speak for you if you disagree, but I personally think Abdul Carter at two would make more sense in my mind. But it seems like the Browns are more interested in Travis Hunter at this point.
I agree with what you just said. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, cool. At this pick, and we said that there might be some trades, and this is the first one we have. New York Giants. Obviously, they're a team that would love to have Cam Ward fall to them at this spot.
Sure.
It's not going to happen, especially in this scenario. We obviously don't have a quarterback here that we're interested in. Could be we've heard Jackson Dart, the name thrown around. Shador Sanders hasn't been in the loop for this pick for a while. Both Graham and I don't see either of those quarterbacks at this pick as a realistic possibility, just based on where these guys are ranked on most consensus big boards and where where they stack up at this point in the draft at pick number three. So we're gonna have them trade out. The question is, who is their trade partner? And looking through these teams, I think that the Las Vegas Raiders would be a prime trade up candidate. Graham, you got any thoughts on that, or are you willing to part with that pick there at six?
Yeah, I think that could make sense, certainly. Before we jump to the trade itself, I want to just touch a little bit about quarterback at this spot. And maybe you disagree, we haven't talked about this extensively, but I think the Giants could be in a position where they are desperate enough to where they do need to grab Shador Sanders at this spot. We've yet to see that quarterback domino fall for them. It sounds like it's going to be Aaron Rodgers or Russell Wilson. I think either of those guys would mean that you don't have to take Shador at number 3. But again, I think it's firmly on the table, in my opinion, Shador at number 3. I think you and I are both of the opinion that it's probably not going to happen, though. But that's, maybe we're in the minority at this point on that one. But to your question, yeah, I think the Raiders could certainly look to move up. They're aggressively trying to attack this offseason, clearly, with Pete Carroll at the helm. Not got a long tenure, I would say, at this point. Just being the oldest coach in the NFL. I think him trading up for Abdul Carter would be extremely enticing. I don't know if that's where you're going to go with the pick, but him and Max Crosby on that D line would be insane. So I really like that move potentially. I think to move up, it would take definitely their first and probably that second as well to get up
That
to
37 pick, yeah, for this compensation right here. Yeah, it would be for Abdul Carter is kind of the thought process.
Okay.
You've already touched on pairing up Christian Wilkins on that D line with Max Crosby and Abdul Carter would be pretty freaky, and I think that's probably ultimately exactly what we're going to do here. So Abdul Carter at 3, with our first trade of the mock draft, Giants moving back to 6. We'll see what they do there, but your pick at 4 here.
Yeah, I like it. So number 4, I think really the two positions that are in play, or two players I would say that are in play would be Tet McMillan, potentially Armand Membo, maybe Mason Graham at this spot. They did sign Milton Williams, so adding to that D line I think would make sense. We know Mike Vrabel. He wants to build through the trenches. I think that would be enticing to him personally. I think if Travis Hunter was maybe on the board, he'd be the only exception to that, going there. So I'm actually not going to go Tet McMillan at this spot. We are going to go Armand Membo out of Missouri. He's quickly rising to be OT1 for most people, with Will Campbell not really being a perfect fit at tackle for most teams, not the best athleticism either. So the way Armand Membo competed at the combine, along with the measurables, the tape, all that, it definitely seems like he's going to go pretty high in April.
Cool. Yeah, and I like that pick. I think that Membo ultimately is going to be the first tackle off the board. I think Josh Simmons out of Ohio State could give him a run for his money. I think that's more of a undervalued tackle prospect at this point, obviously, some of which due to the injury, but ultimately I think Membo goes in that 4 spot, so I like that pick a lot. This pick I'm not going to spend too much time on. This has been the pick for a while now, and based on what the Jacksonville Jaguars' new general manager had mentioned, that they want to get bigger in the trenches, and that's kind of where they want to prioritize their offseason plan. Mason Graham is the pick for me, so I'm not going to belabor this one too much.
Yeah, I think that makes a ton of sense for them, certainly. I think defense is the pick for them. I think they could certainly look to add to their secondary as well, so I wouldn't be surprised if they went corner. But based on what you said, James Gladstone, their new GM, I think that makes a ton of sense for them too. So the Giants here, this is an interesting scenario because they did trade back for this spot. I'm still not convinced they go quarterback here yet. I think they still want to try to add to the talent around them. I think if they were going to go quarterback, they would have just stuck at 3 and taken whichever quarterback they like. I don't really see a scenario in which they trade back and still take a quarterback, in my opinion. At least not if they only move down 3 spots. If they would have moved back into the early teens or something, or tens, maybe. But if they're only moving back a few spots, I don't see them necessarily going quarterback here. So they will look to address that in the draft, no doubt, no matter what happens. But I'm not sure it's at this spot. So here, definitely a few different options. I think they could look to bolster their O-line. Maybe Will Campbell is in play here potentially. Josh Simmons, you mentioned, could be maybe in play as well. I think D-line or corner could make sense for them too. So there's a few different options that they could go at this point here. For me, I'm going to say that they're going to go with Jahdae Barron out of Texas. I think they're going to look to improve their secondary. I think there's a good chance this guy does go as high as number 6. There are a lot of teams that like him quite a bit. And so I think they look to add to that secondary. They just signed a safety in Javon Holland. They've got Tyler Nubin. Maybe Jahdae Barron could play that nickel for them and look to have a really strong secondary. And Paulson Debo they just signed as well, so really turn their secondary into a strength. I think that could be very interesting for them.
I love that pick, and I think everything you said about quarterback. If you're going to trade back from 3 to 6, at least in this scenario, quarterback doesn't make sense, or else you just take him there at 3 without the risk. So I really like that, and I think Barron was not the direction I had planned for that pick as you were talking about it, but I think ultimately Barron is a fantastic player and a good fit there as well, which is might be more important. Um, New York Jets. This one, and again, we're doing this kind of on the fly. I've got ideas of players I like here, but we haven't, given this too much thought prior. New York Jets. Quarterback is not going to be in play, although it says it's a need. Justin Fields is the guy, at least for this next year, so I'm not worried about that. Receiver is interesting. I think that, however, I wouldn't go with Tet in this instance. I think a receiver like Matthew Golden or Luther Burden would be really fun to pair with Garrett Wilson there. But I don't think you really need to focus on that either. I'm actually going to go with defensive line here, and I'm going to go with Kenneth Grant out of Michigan. I think this is someone who could go a lot higher than people are currently anticipating. There are some people who don't have him in the first round altogether, but I think that this would be maybe his ceiling, and you pair him up with Quinnen Williams there would be a pretty nasty D-line there, so I'm going to go with Kenneth Grant.
That would be a nice addition. We've talked about having those two D tackles being a really nice pairing for a lot of teams, so I could see that trend continuing here. Panthers number 8. I think Ted McMillan is certainly in play. Probably the only offensive player that's actually in play for them at this spot. Let's go edge rusher, though, for the Panthers. I think that would be their direction here. There's not been another edge player taken yet at this spot. I think there are a few different options here that teams are going to go with. We're going to actually go Jalen Walker out of Georgia. Kind of a hybrid off-ball linebacker, edge rusher, played for Georgia. I think teams are going to value his skill set a lot and his athleticism, his versatility. I think he's going to end up going pretty high in April. So that's where I'm electing to go here with Jalen Walker. How do you feel about that pick?
Yeah, I like it. I think Jalen Walker is somebody who definitely will go higher than consensus. I know actually in Daniel Jeremiah's most recent mock draft, he had him here at 5. So
Yeah,
he
so
is
he went
the
number 5,
the
yeah.
league certainly, at least based on the analysts and the draft guys that we have access to, are pretty high on someone like Jalen Walker. So DJ is a trusted guy in the space. So I think it's a great pick there. New Orleans Saints. I think now that I'm looking at it, I think you just need talent in the room, and I think that having a weapon, as Remy wants to give us some squeaks in the back there, I think
I don't
weapon
think the
here.
mic picked it up.
Oh no, the mic picked it up on my end at least, but
Oh, okay. Maybe it
well, for the viewers, Graham's dog was giving some squeaks in the back. But anyways, back to the mock draft. No, I think weapon here makes the most sense. And when I say weapon, I mean offensive weapon. So for this pick, I'm actually going to go with Matthew Golden out of Texas. Obviously the 4.29 blazing speed. And he's been a hot riser through this whole process, and he continues to rise in this case, falling at number 9 to the New Orleans Saints, who desperately need help in the weapon category.
Yeah, that's interesting. I like that pairing there with Chris Olave. Matthew Golden's got that inside-outside versatility. I think Kellen Moore would look to utilize his skill set most certainly here. At number 10 for the Chicago Bears, I think that, obviously they made a lot of moves in their offensive line in free agency via trade, and they signed Drew Dahlman as well. I don't know if they're entirely done building that offensive line. I think Will Campbell certainly could be in play here for them at that spot. Of course, Ashton Genty is also a popular pick here as well, being that, just another dynamic sort of playmaker here. We are going to go Ashton Genty, number 10 overall for the Chicago Bears. Let's keep bolstering that team. Add to the running back room, of course, another tool in the toolbox there for Ben Johnson and company.
And I think that's the absolute right pick in this scenario. Obviously, a blue player for you, blue chip talent, and obviously a top 5 player for me. So I think it makes sense. It's good value at 10, even though running backs have been devalued in the past. I think the running back is starting to be valued more in the NFL. So I like that pick at 10. At 11. this has been one of my favorite picks I've done for the 49ers altogether, and I'm going to continue that trend. In the mock draft with Drew we did not too long ago, if you haven't seen that video, go watch that. It was our most recent mock draft. I went with Josh Simmons at 11, and I'm going to make that same pick again. This is your Trent Williams replacement. A little bit of position versatility. His first year starting at Ohio State was a right tackle and then moved over to left tackle. So position versatility there a little bit. And then your Trent Williams replacement, and actually plays very similarly to him as well. So Josh Simmons at 11.
Nice. Yeah, I like that pick. I liked it the first time, and I like it again. For Dallas at 12, Zach Martin just retired in the interior. I think they could potentially look to slide Will Campbell in there in the interior. I think Matthew Golden would have definitely been in play here. I could see Jerry being high on his skill set and hit the fact he ran that sub 4.3 at the combine as well. I think in this scenario, a guy that I think is going to go pretty high that hasn't gone yet is going to be Shamar Stewart, edge rusher out of Texas A&M. So keep him in state to potentially probably pair with Micah Parsons unless something crazy happens there. Just add to that D-line. DeMarcus Lawrence just left as well. So I like Shamar Stewart out of A&M at this pick here for Jerry and the boys over there in Dallas.
Yeah, feels definitely like a Dallas pick. They like their athletes over there, so Shamar Stewart. They also like to home grow their players, so someone with a lot of room to grow. Maybe Micah Parsons teaches him a thing or two. So we'll see how that transpires. But yeah, pick number 13. We've seen the edge rushers fall a little bit here. Definitely some possibilities there. I know they picked Chop Robinson last year, had a phenomenal rookie season. But let's address the offensive line here. I think offensive line is a desperate need. I think there's a few candidates who could go here. Tyler Booker kind of catches my eye early on this one. A lot of people peg him as a for sure first rounder, although the guard position traditionally is one that is not super highly valued in the first round. Will Campbell, a little bit of a slide here. I'm a little bit more nervous about kicking him into guard kind of plays with a high pad level. So also the 6'6" frame doesn't necessarily make it easy to play guard in the NFL. So it's either going to be Kelvin Banks here or Tyler Booker, and I'm actually going to go with Tyler Booker. I kind of talked myself into it there, but guard is a massive need. Offensive line altogether is a massive need. So we're just going to take the best interior offensive lineman in the draft here at 13.
Yeah, I could definitely see it. It's interesting because the Dolphins, they clearly haven't valued their interior offensive linemen recently, and with Booker, it'll be interesting to see what team he goes to with the athletic score. Just wasn't being as high as people had hoped for it to. But I could definitely see the Dolphins taking a shot on Booker here, and I think he probably does go first round. Best guard tape, I would say, definitely pretty comfortably. So
Yeah.
I could definitely see that. Here with the Indianapolis Colts. So again, a lot of different directions they could go with this pick. I think there's, people are mocking Tyler Warren here. I could definitely see that. I think just add another playmaker on the offensive side of the ball. I actually like Jihad Campbell, though, out of Alabama linebacker here at this spot. Keep adding to that defense, try to bolster that a little bit. Work with kind of the weapons that they already have, and go from there. So I definitely could see Tyler Warren, but I like Jihad Campbell here at the spot, linebacker from Bama.
Yeah, and that's one of my favorite players in the entire draft, so you don't have to do any convincing of me of that being a worthwhile pick,
I
having
would
a
be
linebacker
sad
go
as a
there
Titans
14.
fan with the AFC South bolstering the defense, but
Yeah.
It is what it is.
Jihad Campbell, absolute freak, sideline to sideline speed, has a little bit of pass rushing he can do here and there, so I really like Jihad Campbell as a player overall, and we see back-to-back Bama players actually go here. Pick number 15. One thing that I found really interesting with the Falcons specifically is a lot of teams you can kind of pick up tendencies. Like I know we just drafted for the Colts. They love their athletes. That's kind of like one of their staple things they look for is high athletic scores and profiles. And I think with the Falcons, what they value a lot in the first round, as we've seen multiple times, is skill position. They went quarterback. Their last 4 first-round picks have been quarterback, tight end, receiver, and running back. So I think that we're going to keep up that trend here because ultimately teams fall into their trends. The question is which one, and obviously Ted, the talent there, a little bit of a slide. I don't know how I feel about pairing up. Yes, I do. I'm gonna go ahead and do it. I was gonna say pairing up the guys with the similar frames of Ted McMillan and Drake London. A lot of people have comp those two as a similar play style. And while I disagree that their play styles are not similar, I don't think their play styles are similar. I think the frame is something that's definitely comparable to Drake London. But definitely Tet being a little bit more of a savvy route runner and a little bit more of a, I guess they both have large catch radiuses, I should say. So more of a route runner with Tet, more of a big body deep threat with Drake London. So we're going to pair Tet and have just a freak receiving core of 6'5" tight end, 6'5" receiver, and 6'5" receiver. So it'll be interesting to see, but I like Tet there.
Yeah, that's interesting. I don't think I've seen that yet, so I like that from a standpoint. I think people are kind of pegging Ted McMillan as like a strictly outside, like X receiver type guy, but I actually see him adding a lot of value in like a power slot kind of role at the next level. So I could definitely see that
That's a great point.
fitting into that offense potentially. Again, there's another kind of wrinkle there potentially to add to. So I could see it. It's again not one we've seen before, but I like that. Yeah, here with the Arizona Cardinals. So, again, another team that could go several different directions, I think, at this point. I think defensive line is still in play, even with the Josh Sweat addition. A guy that's maybe fallen a little bit that we are going to go with here, I think, actually, is going to be Will Johnson, cornerback out of Michigan. Still a need in that secondary. And again, this is a good player that is maybe sliding a bit more than some people would maybe expect him to. I think not testing at the Pro Day and Combine is maybe going to hurt his stock a little bit. Plus that last year, 2024 tape in Michigan wasn't nearly as good as the year prior to. So I think that's maybe something that's causing some concern. But at the end of the day, you're getting somebody who's arguably CB1, aside from maybe Travis Hunter, in this draft. So we're going to go Will Johnson here.
Yeah, and Will Johnson, top 10 player for me in the draft, pretty comfortably. There are a lot of those guys, I talked about this in an earlier video, who translate better to the NFL. And Will Johnson being as technically sound as he is, I'm a big fan of corners who have a lot of patience. I think that some of the top corners in the NFL have that trait of being super patient. And I think Will Johnson possesses that trait, which ultimately leads to, the elite guys for the position. And ultimately, Will Johnson has that. So we're going to move on to the Bengals here. I think defense needs to be the pick. Desperately need defense. With what they're doing on the offensive side of the ball, paying T. Higgins, paying Mike Gesicki, paying Jamar Chase, paying Joe Burrow, there's a lot of money being tied up in those skill positions on offense. And I think that in order to do that and get away with it, they need to draft well and draft often on the defensive side of the ball. A couple of different ways we could go here. I'm ultimately going to go with I think Tyreek Williams could be a great player. We haven't mocked him in the first round in a while. I think that he could be in there. He had a really strong combine. Walter Nolan, top 5 player in the class for me. I don't ultimately think he goes this high, although I do think this is probably where he starts to be, considered. I'm actually going to go with edge defender here. I'm going to go with Micah Williams, another run-stopping edge with some upside in the pass game. This is like one of your 6'5" frames, super athletic build. In that 6'5" frame, obviously. So if you teach him to pass rush a little bit, I think you can have some high upside with Michael. And then obviously with the Trey Hendrickson news, we don't know what's going to happen with that. This is kind of just your insurance policy with that, although he's less of a true pass rusher than Trey Hendrickson. So
yeah, I think a lot of that too with him and these A&M guys. I think the scheme they were in is important to note, where a lot of them were asked to just kind of seal off the edge, not necessarily go sack the quarterback, and so that's maybe why we're not seeing as much of that production you'd like to see out of that. So I think that is something that needs to be taken into consideration. But for a lot of people, Micah Williams has been a top player. He was injured all year for Georgia as well, so I think teams are going to be high on him certainly. So I like that pick. This is another pick that we saw in our last mock draft that I think, again, I'm going to say it, the Seahawks will be jumping up and down for this one. And again, you may not agree with necessarily Will Campbell sliding into guard here in this scenario, but I think the Seahawks would elect to take somebody of his caliber at this spot, where, again, arguably the best offensive lineman in the draft for some people. The short arms, they're not going to be a concern for some teams. Some teams are going to care about that quite a bit. So we're going to again, the Seahawks just desperately need interior offensive line assistance, especially with bringing in Sam Darnold. So in this scenario, we are going to go Will Campbell here to slide into guard more than likely for them at number 18.
Yeah, and you going with the back-to-back Will picks with Will Johnson and Will Campbell there. So
That's why I got
um,
mixed up. Yeah,
you've got an
exactly.
affinity for your Wills. That's what it is.
I
Your
guess
Will
so.
Levis. That's you got an affinity for them. So
Yeah, yeah. I'll be, closing that door once Cam Ward comes in the building. But yes, I agree. Yeah,
exactly, yeah. At 19 here, a couple different ways we could go. I think right here, I'm actually going to do something a little bit different. And I believe DJ had this in his mock draft. Daniel Jeremiah had this in his mock draft as well, and it kind of piqued my interest. I could see somebody like Colston Loveland being drafted in the first round, certainly, and being drafted before Tyler Warren, actually, who won the Mackey Award there at Penn State. So, Loveland, his tape with, I mentioned it also before, with, I watched a lot of J.J. McCarthy being a Vikings fan in college, so I've seen a lot of Colston Loveland. Obviously, the offense took a huge hit. He was one of their only bright spots post that national championship run, and I think ultimately he goes to a spot where he can really thrive as a more of a receiving tight end, less of an inline guy than your Tyler Warren possibly. And Baker gets another weapon in Colston Loveland.
yeah. I like that pick for them. I could see it, potentially as well. Broncos here. I think if they didn't sign Evan Ingram, this would be like no brainer. Tyler Warren. I think that's still definitely a possibility. I'm not discounting that. I don't think Evan Ingram should necessarily make you move the needle too much on that one. A guy that we haven't had in the first round yet would be Omarion Hampton out of UNC. Chapel Hill, a guy that I think does have a lot of upside. A lot of people, again, you and I are pretty clear, like Ashton Genty, RB1, and I think most people are as well. But there are a lot of people out there who think that Omarion Hampton's pretty close to that. Obviously, put up some great numbers at the combine as well. His tape was incredible also. I think that this could be another piece to the offensive puzzle for them. We know that Sean Payton likes to run his offenses through his tight ends, his running backs, those type of guys. So maybe Omarion Hampton is their joker. So I'm going to go with Omarion Hampton out of UNC at number 20 for the Broncos.
Yeah, and definitely someone who has picked up a lot of steam as a first rounder. The talent's there, so I think it makes a ton of sense given the scheme and given the need. Pittsburgh Steelers here at 21. Couple of different ways you could go. Steelers in the past couple of years have kind of adopted that. When I think of teams who truly draft the best player available, the Ravens have kind of been that staple for most teams. I think the Steelers have been doing something similar the past couple of years. So I'm going to keep the trend going of taking best player available. Tyler Warren, or maybe not best player available, I should say, maybe biggest slide, because BPA is obviously subjective. So I think Tyler Warren would be interesting. Pat Fryermuth just signed an extension not that long ago, so probably not going to go there. Malachi Starks is definitely an interesting thought for me here. I think defense is going to be a big possibility. I think Kelvin Banks is someone who could go here. Ultimately, I'm actually going to switch it up and go with Donovan Ezereku out of Boston College. Super polished as a pass rusher. The talent he went against on the offensive side of the ball, the tackles that he faced were not the greatest, but I think the production and the film speaks for itself. And Donovan Ezereku goes here at 21 to the Pittsburgh Steelers.
I like that pick. I think he's definitely another guy getting some steam. A lot of people like his tape and his production. I think the Steelers are a sneaky defensive line team. I don't think people are talking about them going D-line enough. Obviously didn't go quarterback. I don't think they go quarterback in this scenario. So, yeah, I like that pick for them. At number 22, the Los Angeles Chargers. I think this is where you add some firepower to their offense. We are going to go Tyler Warren here. You mentioned it. The slide has happened for too long. Maybe Harbaugh would have personally liked his guy Colston Loveland to be at this spot, but I actually think Tyler Warren would fit that offense as well, kind of be that inline blocking tight end, be able to use him in some wrinkles in the offense, get another guy for Justin Herbert there to target. So I could definitely see this being in play here for them if it
Yeah,
shook up this way.
good for a few reasons. Like you've already mentioned, this is maybe Tyler Warren, not like the greatest blocking tight end we've ever seen, but obviously someone who's
No,
more
yeah.
physical in the run game than someone like your Colston Loveland. You mentioned Harbaugh wanting his guy at Michigan, but ultimately gets the Mackey winner, so he can't complain too much. And who also can't complain too much is the Green Bay Packers, because Luther Burden has fallen this far. Wide receiver one, particularly for them, they're the team of having 6 different wide receiver fours on their team. So they ultimately land someone who, for me, who is the number 11 player in this class, and Luther Burden didn't have a very strong last year. The tape was much better the year prior. Luther Burden is a wide receiver one in the league for me, and ultimately the Packers get their guy, which makes me slightly upset. But
Yeah. That's interesting. So you do think they break the mold, go receiver first round this time around for a
I
guy
think they
like
have
Luther
to.
Burden?
We've said it for multiple years, but I think this is the year where they're like, "Hey, we need somebody," especially given the health concerns they've had in their receiving room. They got to get somebody early, and they got to get somebody who has that upside to be a top guy. And Luther Burden's it for me.
I think a lot of Packers fans would be ecstatic with that. It'll be just yet to be seen if it actually happens. So I
Right.
think that's probably the popular answer with our Packers fans, but we'll see. Um, Here at number 24, I think there's a lot of players that would potentially be of high interest to the Minnesota Vikings, and so I think there's an opportunity to go, with a guy that they like here a lot. I'm actually going to predict. And I don't know how you feel about this, Micah, but I'm going to actually have the New York Giants hopping into the first round to get their quarterback on that fifth-year option.
Wow, I love it.
So they just picked up that second from the previous trade we made with them, dropping down to 6 with the Vegas Raiders. So let's pair up maybe their second round picks to go up, or maybe they go early second and one and their third. I'm not sure what the trade chart would actually end up being on this one here. You can give me your thoughts on that one as well. But I think again, the Vikings need draft capital. They filled a lot of their needs already, and so I could definitely see them trading back. Still get an early second, so they're still going to get a high contributing player at that spot. But I think the Giants could get aggressive here, go up and get their quarterback they didn't get earlier in the draft.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, it depends on what we're looking at for compensation here. As far as the trade itself goes, I think the Vikings, as you've already mentioned, are lacking a lot of picks this year, given they only have four. So getting extra draft capital makes a ton of sense to me, and I think it makes sense to the Vikings as well. What were you thinking for compensation? Were you thinking which one of
I'm
these seconds in
thinking
particular?
I'm thinking they could probably look to maybe flip that Vegas pick at 37, maybe 37 and 65. Do you think that would get it
Yeah,
done?
I think that would certainly get it done. I mean, a 13 spot jump feels about right for getting a swap here, and then you're throwing in an additional early third. So I don't hate it at all to get back into the first and secure ultimately your future. So we've talked about this a lot as far as the Giants with the third overall pick to the first overall pick, the kind of draft compensation they would take. I think ending up with somebody like Jade Barron and then a quarterback who you could still realistically get in this later spot with only giving up a second that you picked up in a different trade and then your third round pick, I think you live with that, and I think ultimately it makes a ton of sense.
Yeah, I agree with you on that, certainly. So here we are going to go Shador Sanders in the first round. I think if there's going to be another, we've heard a lot of people talk about there's some Jackson Dart buzz in the first round. Maybe that still potentially happens as well. But I think, in this scenario, like you already laid out, the Giants would be ecstatic to not have to take Shador at number 3, but yet be able to pick him up later in the first round, which I think is firmly still an option. A lot of our viewers may not realize that, but I think it's more of a possibility than a lot of people realize, and we've talked about that for months now. But I still think that is certainly a good chance. And I think in this scenario, you trade back up. You, like you mentioned, don't have to realistically give up that much to move back up. You still keep your early second, and you lock in that fifth-year option for a guy who's probably sitting behind a Russ Wilson or an Aaron Rodgers in this situation.
Yeah, and I think this is, if you're a Giants fan, this is like what we did in this mock draft is probably your best case scenario moving forward. Like this to me helps you out the most for the now and the future. So you're getting two solid players in the first round. Jade Barron, I'm quite a bit higher on than someone like Shador Sanders, as we've already mentioned, but we move anyways. Houston Texans at 25. Offensive line has to be the pick. I mean, I can't see. I would love to end up with someone like Micah right here, pair up the Ohio State connection at quarterback and receiver. I just think that with what they lost in the offensive line, they have to make moves. They did pick up Cam Robinson today, so that's obviously a great pick. Protect, that's your replacement for your left tackle there. But I think Kelvin Banks is someone you could go here. A little bit more position versatility also. Someone who you could kick inside to guard. You could play a tackle. Kelvin Banks falling here is phenomenal for the Houston Texans.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. That makes a lot of sense to me. Here with the Los Angeles Rams, so a team that really likes their draft and develop guys, and they could definitely go with a few different spots here on this one. We're gonna go out of the cornerback room here. a guy who blew it up at the combine here. We're going to go Maxwell Hairston, cornerback out of Kentucky, a guy that really put on a show at the combine. I think they could look to add to their corner room a little bit, get a guy they can develop a little bit, and again, still could probably step on the field and contribute for them right away, either way. But I think this could be a guy for them potentially at that spot.
Yeah, I love that pick. Maxwell Harrison, like you said, hot riser, ball hawk, pick six. It seems like Kentucky always has solid DBs out there with Drew Phillips coming out this past year. So, yeah, I love the pick. And we're going to move to pick 27 with the Baltimore Ravens. As I've already mentioned, the Steelers kind of have that BPA philosophy. I think the Ravens do the same thing, although I don't think it would be Malachi Starks, as fun as that would be pairing up Kyle Hamilton and Malachi Starks. They're actually going to go edge here, and they're going to go James Pierce Jr., someone who has his concerns possibly. We don't really know to what extent. Regular guys like us don't really know what that looks like outside of what we hear. So James Pierce is the pick. Phenomenal combine. Obviously has a super high production, pass rush win rate in particular at Tennessee. So we'll see what Baltimore can make of someone like James Pierce.
Yeah, I could totally see that. I like that for them. I think keep making a strength, keep building up their D line, and why not? And again, getting a guy as talented as James Pierce Jr. I think could make sense. So him, and then another guy who I think is going to go and be coveted in this spot in particular because of the slide potentially is a guy like Mike Green, another guy who's had some off-field potential concerns, character concerns, so we're not 100% sure what that looks like for teams. I think in this scenario, there actually would be calls to Detroit here, probably from a lot of these teams here, maybe even moving up one spot being the Commanders just to bolster their team a little bit. We're going to go ahead and just take Mike Green here at this spot because I think although they would get calls, I think the Lions would opt to just take that guy, add to their D-line, pair him with Aiden Hutchinson on the other side, and really wreak some havoc there on the defensive line.
Yeah, with the injuries they've had, it just makes too much sense to keep getting more additions, more talent there in the on the defensive side of the ball. So I think Mike Green is the pick that I would go with there, and it's ultimately what you did. So I love that. I love that selection. Washington Commanders here at 29. A few different ways they could go. It seems like they're also in their win now mode. Obviously, with what they did last year, finishing as a top 4 team in the league, they've made moves that would show, hey, we're trying to win and we're trying to win now. So I think a fun player for here, if you want to talk about winning now, would be Malachi Starks. And I think that is it a position of need? Maybe not. Are there bigger needs? Maybe not. But is it the most pro-ready and ready-to-win now player available? Absolutely. So we're going to go Malachi Starks there at 29.
Yeah, I could see that. They did lose Jeremy Chin in free agency, and not like he was going to stop them maybe either way from potentially going here. But there may be somewhat of a need at safety for them even too, to your point. So I could definitely see that here.
And real quick, sorry, before I was just going to cut
ahead.
you off before because I had a thought that had crossed my mind. They do have, I'm blanking on his name. You know me with my names. It's been a theme on the channel. The guy they picked last year out of Michigan, receiver converted to DB. He's like their nickel player. I can't remember his name for the life of me, but
Not Mike Sandstro, right?
yes, Mike Sainstro.
He's a
That's
guy
exactly
you liked a
who I'm
lot
talking
too.
about. Guy I liked a lot, and I completely blanked on it. So a lot of people have said Malachi Starks is someone who could be like that nickel role. I actually do like him quite a bit as like your free roaming safety. So
I can see that too.
some people want him to play nickel. I kind of view him as like a ball hawk, like a deep field safety, which is the thought process for this particular pick. So wanted to clarify that. Go ahead and continue. Sorry to cut you off there.
No, you're good. That's good clarification. I'm glad you brought that point up because maybe some of our Commanders fans would have been like, well, what's the deal there? But I think that clarification makes sense as a justification for the pick. So on to the Buffalo Bills here. So, they did sign Joey Bosa in free agency. There are some moves that they're looking to make. They added to their defensive line. I think they could look to potentially continue to add to their defensive line here. So there's a few different options there for D-line at this spot here. Go ahead and scroll back up for me a little bit there, Micah. We're going to go ahead and actually go Derek Harmon out of Oregon, add some interior defensive line for them just to keep bolstering that. As we know, the best teams look to add to their, in the trenches, offensive, defensive line. So that's where we're going to go with the pick here.
Yeah, makes a ton of sense. Help Josh Allen out on the defensive side of the ball, which is ultimately what failed him in the playoffs. So I love the pick. The player is getting a lot of buzz as well. He's got the athletic lower half, so we'll see how his weight and the proportions transition. But I love the pick and I love the fit there as well. Kansas City Chiefs at 31, and I keep am being I'm being stared down by one player here, and I
Everybody
can't.
knows what it is.
Everybody knows who it is. I can't help but think about what Walter Nolan would do with Spags on that D line next to Chris Jones. The idea of it is one that I can't overlook. So ultimately, I'm gonna go with Walter Nolan. I think that Walter Nolan. This is for me. If this scenario happened, the Chiefs would win the first round of the NFL draft. This to me, Walter Nolan is a top 5 player in my class. He's my number 4 player on my big board. The tape is astronomical. What he does at his best, high motor player. What he does at his best is freaky. And I think if you put him on that team, the Chiefs are in a position to where they could take pretty big swings, considering they have 15 at their quarterback. So I think they take a big swing here, and ultimately I think it's going to pay off for them. So
That's interesting. A lot of people are pegging offensive line here just because they do need some assistance there. But I think you get a guy like that to, again, pair with somebody who's the best in the game there. I think that could make a ton of sense as well. So
yeah,
and maybe not the best tackle spot here for the Chiefs. So maybe there wasn't a great option. So I think at that situation, like you've talked about before, best player available makes the most sense.
that's kind of where I was going with that. Also, I'm glad you mentioned it as I pulled up the tackles in the offensive linemen. I think the only 2 realistic options here at pick 31 are Zabel or Connerly. Zabel projects more as your inside guy, so I mean, I guess guard is a need. Maybe they're interested in that. Probably more of a center even. So which I guess is also a need, but well, I guess not. Creed Humphrey's there, so
No, they got
maybe
Creed
not.
Humphrey, so they're
Sorry,
good. Yeah.
guard there. So either way, I don't really love Zabel at this spot, and then Josh Connerly is the only other option. But they also just brought in their left tackle, so unless you're playing him on the right side, I'm not super interested in either of these players at that spot. And ultimately, Walter Nolan's better than those 2 players, so that's why I went with Walter Nolan. But I appreciate the clarification and bringing that point up as well.
Yeah, no, you're good. So yeah, there's that's all, well and good what you mentioned there. So here with the Eagles, I think this would have been a perfect Walter Nolan landing spot as well. So I'm actually a little upset you took him there, so I couldn't end it with a perfect Howie Roseman draft here.
That would feel so Howie if that happened, dude.
It would. So a little bit there I could see, but of course it doesn't happen in this scenario here. I think they could potentially look to add like a Gray Zabel here at the end of the first round. Just, guard is now kind of a need for them as, what's his name? Now I'm forgetting names.
Right tackle?
Yeah, no, right guard. Who just left?
Mekhi Becton.
Mekhi Becton, yes, thank you. Just left for the Chargers. So I could potentially see that again. Another team that looks to continue to add to their, add to their strengths. So I could definitely see that. I see potentially Nick Scordon in play here again. Add to their D line. I think the D line class is so deep they'll kind of find what they need later. Let's go ahead and go Gray Zabel here, number 32. Just keep making a strength here for the Eagles.
Yeah, and that's the Eagles' philosophy as I get an award. That's the Eagles' philosophy. Just keep building up the offensive line, and I don't doubt that they're going to stick to that plan, especially if someone of Gray Zabel's caliber, someone who's got position versatility, they can coach him up to kind of do whatever they want. So I really love the pick. This draft has been super fun. We had a lot of different things that I personally hadn't thought of happen in this mock, but that's the reality of the NFL draft. You don't really know what's going to happen until that late night in April.
Yeah, exactly. A lot of different things could happen here, starting off with the Raiders trading up. Giants ultimately not going quarterback until later. They trade back up there. Packers taking a receiver in the first round. Like, that's the most unheard of thing that we've seen in a while. So maybe that. We talked about a few different things here. So, yeah, I ultimately like, kind of what we did. Again, some of it a little bit out there, but you never know, especially in a draft class like this, like we've talked about before, where there's not too many, players that are in separate tiers of one another. There are a few blue chip guys, but aside from that, in that range, the mid first to late second round, a lot of these guys are kind of graded similarly for a lot of teams, it sounds like. So I think this draft in particular could end up being a bit more of a surprise than a lot of drafts are.
Yeah, most definitely. And I want to give you your flowers real quick. I think one of my favorite picks that you did for this mock draft is that Jihad Campbell there at 14. I've seen him mocked there before, but I didn't really give it much thought because I usually have him going in the spots around it. But I love that pick that you made right there. That's a great pick. Ultimately, it was a really interesting mock draft overall. But you got any final thoughts before we wrap it up?
Not really. I'd be curious to see what everybody else thinks of this a little bit. If there's anything that seemed crazy at this point here, I could certainly see there's an argument for it, maybe for some of these picks. But at the same time, like we already talked about, we don't know what's going to happen. So
Yeah.
we will yet to be seen. I think the only thing we firmly, and you can't even say for sure no, but it sounds pretty much like Cam Ward is a lock to go number one. That's pretty much the only thing I'll say no at this point. Other than
Yeah.
that, I think this first round is going to be fairly chaotic. So it'll be a very exciting time in late April.
Yeah, I think that's the great word to use is chaotic because everything after one, we have no idea what's going to happen. As we've already talked about, me and you like Abdul at 2, and we mocked Travis Hunter going 2. So I love the chaos. It makes for a fun mock draft, and it makes for inevitably a fun draft night for day one. But that's what we've got for this mock draft. I appreciate you guys tuning in, and we'll be making some more videos here soon. So thanks everybody. Until next time.
Appreciate it, guys. We'll talk to you soon. See ya.